this.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor and privilege to be here. I thank Dr. Landless for his kind words of introduction, and truly it's an honor and a privilege to work closely with Dr. Landless and his team as we try to improve health for the World Church, as we try to train the leaders in the World Church to be more effective in health ministry, and I think that my prayer is that everyone would get enormous benefit as a result of being here. What I would like to do for the next 25 minutes for you is to highlight recent scientific research that shows and powerfully illustrates the relevance of the historic health message that we have had, and that also illustrates multiple new opportunities for ministry and service and reaching our contemporary societies with the good news of the gospel using the right arm of the message. So I am building on the theme, becoming all that you can be, and begin by reminding us of what Jesus promised us, that he had come that all of us might have life and have it more abundantly. One of the challenges we face in contemporary Western society that is a major storm affecting brain and body is Alzheimer's disease. It's a neurodegenerative disorder. It impairs memory and cognitive function. A classic symptom that we think of is our reduced ability to remember information. But there are multiple other symptoms. By the way, you will get the PowerPoint in your app. It's not there yet probably, but it will be there. The most common cause of Alzheimer's disease is dementia, and dementia is a general term capturing the decline in cognitive function that can affect daily life. This is a huge challenge. There's a lot of data from the United States and from other industrialized societies. 81% of people with Alzheimer's disease are 75 years or older, with advanced age being the biggest risk factor. As the population ages, this will be a greater problem in the future, and we already see some signs of that, with 71% increase in deaths due to Alzheimer's disease in the United States between 2000 and 2013. And during this same period of time, this disease has rose from being 25th to 12th, the most burdensome disease in the United States. It has also risen from being the 32nd to the 9th in terms of years of life lost to the population. This change has been the biggest increase ever for any disease in the history of health statistics in the United States over a decade. So the emergence of this disease as a significant problem for our society is quite striking. Mild cognitive impairment refers to cognitive decline greater than expected for an individual's age and education, but it typically does not interfere in a major way with the individual's activities of daily living. The challenge is more than half of adults who develop mild cognitive impairment progress to Alzheimer's disease within the next 5 years. There are options to deal with Alzheimer's disease, and the pharmacological treatment is one potential option. It provides limited benefit in the early stages of the disease. In the later stages, it does slow progression, it does provide relief from some symptoms, but it does not result in a definite cure of the disease. In contrast, exercise is relatively safe and has few side effects, and there is enormous scientific interest in the role of exercise, and I want to highlight some of that. There is growing scientific evidence that regular exercise can play a role in the prevention of Alzheimer's disease and mild cognitive impairment and dementia. and that exercise has also shown some promise in the recent research in the treatment of these conditions. Well, what are the mechanisms by which exercise has these impacts? Brain flow declines as we age, and that's one of the challenges that causes cognitive impairment. Research documents that moderate intensity exercise increases blood flow to the brain that results in higher resting cerebral blood flow. Hippocampal circuits, the hippocampus is one part of our brain, are important for episodic memory, and they are adversely affected in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease. Again, the research shows that mild to moderate exercise increases hippocampal volumes and appears to prevent hippocampal volume atrophy over time. Hippocampal neurogenesis is also important for learning and memory, and there is research that suggests that exercise increases hippocampal neurogenesis. So many of the fundamental processes that are critical to good brain health, exercise seems to play a role. Just to give you some sense, here is a review of randomized controlled trials conducted, looking at the role of exercise and cognitive performance, and they have shown that exercise has been linked to improve attention and processing speed, to improve executive function, that's also in our brains, to improve memory. The effects on working memory are less consistent, sometimes found, sometimes not found. Importantly, the research shows that the duration and intensity of exercise did not matter for the benefits to occur. In other words, you don't have to be running a marathon in order to get the benefits. Regular walking will provide those benefits to occur. I'll give you an example of one study, a study of 137 participants. It looked at the relationship between aerobic fitness and nervous system metabolite, right in the right frontal cortex of the brain. The study found that higher aerobic fitness levels protected against the normal age-related decline in NAA, this important nervous system metabolite. In other words, this study is documenting that exercise influences the proliferation of new neurons and increases the production of molecules secreted from neurons that are involved in learning and memory. God knew what he was doing when he gave us exercise. There have also been studies that have looked at the comparison of exercise compared to the treatment of drug treatment in terms of dealing with Alzheimer's disease. And this is a review of randomized controlled trials that tested these two types of methods of addressing Alzheimer's disease. And they found that exercise had a moderate to strong effect for Alzheimer's disease and a small effect for mild cognitive impairment. Drugs had a small effect on cognition for Alzheimer's disease and no effect on mild cognitive impairment. So in other words, exercise had a bigger positive impact on dealing with Alzheimer's disease than did drugs. This article concluded, reviewing the scientific evidence, exercise is an understudied treatment option for patients. Understudied treatment option. Identifying other opportunities to fight Alzheimer's disease. One of the things that recent researchers have noted is that mild cognitive impairment in the elderly is linked to neurodegeneration, poorer cognitive function, but it is also linked to cardiovascular disease risk. And cardiovascular disease, the heart disease and stroke, impairs cognitive function and increases the risk of progression to clinically defined dementia. So it has raised the possibility, if poor cardiovascular function contributes to poor cognitive function, if we treat poor cardiovascular function, can we improve cognitive function? Would a more comprehensive lifestyle intervention prevent cognitive impairment? And I'll give you one of the early classic studies in the area, just done in 2015. It's called the FINGER study. It's the Finnish intervention study to prevent cognitive impairment and disability. It used multiple components. Diet. And again, what kind of diet? A diet high in fruits and vegetables, whole grains and fiber. Very familiar to us. Exercise, looking both at muscle strength and aerobic activity, as well as building cognitive training into this program. And many of the activities involve social engagement and group work together, so they also sought to build social activity. What have been the results of this comprehensive approach to dealing with cognitive impairment? They have found that the intervention improved or maintained cognitive function and reduced the risk of decline in at-risk elderly adults. They found substantial positive effects for executive function and processing speed, important cognitive mechanisms in the brain. And they found that this lifestyle intervention was universally effective. That means it varied whether you were rich or poor, regardless of demographic factors, regardless of risk factors for cardiovascular disease. This risk factor improved cognitive function for all. That has led researchers to ask another question. If a more comprehensive approach seems to improve cognitive function, do we get significant improvements in cognitive function if we simply improve nutrition alone? And two very famous diets that have shown enormous promise in terms of addressing many of our chronic degenerative diseases are the DASH diet that has been very effective in treating hypertension, and the Mediterranean diet that has been used widely in terms of addressing cardiovascular disease risk. And so a multi-center randomized controlled trial was designed that looked at what would be the impact of these diets, the Mediterranean diet or the DASH diet, and it found that yes, the Mediterranean diet does lead to improvements in cognitive function, and the DASH diet, designed to improve the treatment of hypertension, also leads to improvement in cognitive function. And then the researchers wondered, what if we combined the best elements of both of these diets, the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet, both diets that emphasize the kind of diet that the Adventist Church has encouraged. Their diets heavily focused on whole grains and whole foods with very limited use of other products. And so there has been a project called the MIND diet, the Mediterranean and DASH intervention for neurodegenerative delay, that focuses on 10 brain-healthy foods. Again, very familiar to us. Green leafy vegetables and other vegetables and nuts and berries and beans and whole grains. Very limited fish, 1 serving a week. Very limited poultry, 2 servings a week. Olive oil, it does include wine, but you can read Peter Landless and I have written a paper on moderate alcohol consumption and its effects on health. That was a good resource for you. Importantly, it's a natural, plant-based diet emphasizing berries and green leafy vegetables is this combined MIND diet. And what did the researchers find? Or before I tell you what they find, I should tell you what they focused on. The unhealthy foods that the diet seeks to limit: red meats, butter and stick margarine, cheese, pastries and sweets, fried or fast foods. In fact, the diet is that strict in terms of what's good for us that it limits cheese and fried or fast foods, any of these, to less than 1 serving a week for any of the 3. That's how much the diet is wholesome in its nutrition. What researchers have found that good adherence to this dietary program predicted substantially slower decline in overall cognitive function. This is among elderly adults, average age 81, followed over the next 10 years. And just this diet alone substantially reduced a cognitive decline. This decline evident in all 5 domains, in episodic memory, in working memory, in semantic memory, in visuospatial ability, in perceptual speed. The rate of decline was equivalent to being 7.5 years younger in age. In terms of the impact of age to declines in cognitive function, if you follow this diet, it's like it gave you a 7.5 year younger benefit in terms of experience. Here is a prospective study that used this MIND diet again and found that among persons aged 58 to 98, followed over 4.5 years, persons who adhered to this healthy diet following principles we have long advocated, predicted a 53% lower incidence of Alzheimer's disease. Moderate adherence predicted a 35% reduction compared to those who did not follow the diet. Again, enormous evidence, recent evidence, 2015 study, of the benefits of the nutrition advice that God has given this church for a long time as playing a role in cognitive function. I just want to remind, this diet reminds us that Ellen White said that morning exercise is the surest safeguard against colds, coughs, congestions, and 100 other diseases. We now have scientific evidence that shows that Alzheimer's disease is one of those that benefit. She also said that a walk even in winter would be more beneficial to health than all the medicine doctors may prescribe, and that all of us need to make it a priority to get exercise every day, even if we have to leave other things indoors undone. I think this recent research on exercise and cognitive function in late life provides many opportunities for ministry at a level of the local church. We could find new ways to encourage our local community in getting exercise. One opportunity to do that is encouraging people to use their dogs to walk. At least 1/3 of dogs are not walked regularly by their owners, and that there are interventions being done that is encouraging exercise in the local community by encouraging people to walk their dogs. There are also examples of exercise, of interventions where they have gotten, in this case, poor, high crime, low income communities to become much more involved in walking. And they tested that if they did social media, social marketing outreach to the community, and combined that with police patrol walking interventions, they dramatically increased the number of walkers in the poor community from 40 per month to 400 per month at 9 months, and that maintained up to 200 walkers per month 2 years later. Again, it illustrates opportunities that Adventists should be taking the lead on. Another opportunity for Seventh-day Adventists to be much more involved, working with our local communities and reaching out in walking, is mall walking programs. In the United States, for example, there are over 100,000 shopping malls. Many of them are indoor malls. Many of them are free to go get into early in the morning before the shops have opened. And many communities have developed walk-in programs where many persons, the elderly and others, are encouraged to come out and walk. Why should Adventists be so involved and committed to this? Because it's one of the 8 health laws that God has given us. Not only that, Seventh-day Adventists should be the most physically fit people on this planet. Because a command to exercise actually exists within the 10 commandments. The 4th commandment, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, is commandment number 1. It also says 6 days shalt thou labor. The Hebrew word abad is a word that describes getting vigorous physical exertion. We need to keep all of the fourth commandment and ensure that we get 6 days of vigorous physical exertion. And what I'm also saying is if we did that and it could encourage our communities to do that, we will also be promoting health. We'll also be finding ways to reach our communities in meaningful, practical ways of service by finding new ways to reach them with the health message. I also want to conclude as we think of the body and of the mind. I am part in my department at Harvard. There's now a Center for Health and Happiness, focusing on multiple dimensions of psychological well-being that has enormous benefits for physical function. One of these is called purpose in life. There's a lot of research taking place on the benefits of purpose in life that documents that if individuals view something, any aspect of their life as sacred, their marriage as sacred, their work as sacred, we are documenting health benefits linked to that. The role of the sacred and the role of sacred objects is really important. Here is an example of a recent study looking at purpose in life, and it was measured by items such as, I have a sense of direction and purpose in life. Some people wander aimless through life, but I am not one of them. Persons who were high on purpose in life were 2.4 times more likely to remain free of Alzheimer's disease than a person with a low score. So higher levels of purpose in life is an independent predictor in this study of protection from incident Alzheimer's disease. Here's another study. High purpose in life reduced the effects of Alzheimer's disease on cognitive function. So even if you get Alzheimer's disease, if you're high on purpose in life, it minimizes the negative effects. Higher purpose in life reduces the negative effects of Alzheimer's disease pathological changes on the rate of cognitive decline. So even if you get the disease, higher levels of purpose in life seems to again be playing a protective role. It reminds us of our example, Jesus, who sought to glorify his Father in the common things of life. Jesus would have scored high on a measure of purpose in life because of his relationship with his Father, everything he did was important. He brought into his secular labor the same perfection as into the characters he was transforming by his divine power. And Ellen White says he is our pattern. There's also a body of work that shows higher levels of hope, higher levels of optimism have bona fide documented benefits on physical health. And these are thoughts that come from Scripture. A merry heart doeth good like a medicine. Here is a review paper on the benefits of optimism. In some work that I have done with other researchers in my department, we have found that higher levels of optimism leads to higher levels of antioxidants in our blood and lower levels of blood lipids. Optimists are more likely to engage in healthy behaviors. They have slower progression of atherosclerosis. Optimists have lower levels of systemic inflammation. Optimists are also warmer, more outgoing, and have larger social ties. Here is a study from the Nurses' Health Study that shows the relationship between optimism. Those who score high in optimism have a 29% lower risk of overall mortality and a 38% lower risk of heart disease mortality, 39% lower risk of stroke mortality, 37% lower risk of respiratory disease mortality. The effects are there for cancer and are significant but not quite as large as for the other health outcomes. Can we increase optimism? Yes. Research suggests that there's much that we can do. Even simple exercises can, in fact, increase optimism. Again, I say these are opportunities for ministry. This research of optimism can be new seminars we can offer to a local community and show the role of spirituality in providing benefit for us. Ellen White also said, nothing tends to promote health of body and of soul than does a spirit of gratitude and praise. There's a body of scientific research looking at the role of gratitude that finds persons who score higher in gratitude do better in terms of health. And part of that effect is mediated by spirituality. Here is another study that shows randomized control trial, higher levels of gratitude leads to better health outcomes. So again, we have enormous opportunities for ministry. There are recommendations of keeping a journal to maintain the things we are thankful for, and writing letters to people in our lives who have really been important to us. Before I sit down, I want to remind you that while there's much in our history and in our health message that we should be proud of, there are often challenges, and I leave you with one of them. The negative effect of religious participation on one of the challenges we face in our society, obesity. Here is a study that looked at 18 to 30-year-olds at baseline, followed them over the next 20 years, and find the more frequently, this is a study of 4 major sites in the United States, the more frequently persons attended church, the more likely they were to become obese. I call it the church potluck effect. It's a reminder that we need to maximize all of the opportunities. And I leave you with the promise that I hope you have gotten from my talk. What this recent scientific research tells us, we need to believe in the Lord our God, so shall we be established, and believe his prophets, so we will prosper. Thank you.